This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, August 24th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Mediators from West Africa's regional bloc reached an agreement on certain points in talks with Mali's military junta that are aimed at returning the country to civilian rule. Negotiations are expected to continue on Monday, members of both delegations told journalists in Bamako. Leaders of the military junta, led by Colonel Assimi Goita, and mediators from ECOWAS, led by Nigeria's former president Goodluck Jonathan, met behind closed doors all day on Sunday. A senior officer close to the junta told Reuters earlier on Sunday that discussions during the morning session had focused on the bloc's sanctions on Mali following the military coup. Other key issues are to include the fate of deposed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita and details of Mali's transition to civilian rule. The United States has announced that it is suspending cooperation with Mali's military in response to the overthrow of the president. The action was taken as thousands gathered at the start of the weekend in the capital to celebrate the military's takeover. Edward Barron reports.
The United States said on Friday it had suspended cooperation with Mali's military in response to the overthrow of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, as thousands gathered in Bamako's Independence Square to celebrate the junta's takeover. Keita's ousting has dismayed Mali's international partners, who fear it could further destabilize the former French colony and West Africa's entire Sahel region. The United States regularly provides training to soldiers in Mali, including several of the officers who led the coup. A Pentagon spokesperson referred on Friday to the events there as an act of mutiny. But pro-coup Malians danced, tooted vuvuzelas and welcomed the junta members like soccer stars when they arrived to thank their supporters. We are happy to be with you this afternoon. We thank you for your support. We thank the whole of the Mali people for their support, the junta's spokesman told the crowds. The junta's representatives met with a group of politicians on Thursday evening to discuss how best to move forward and organize a transition to civilian power.
That was Edward Barron of Reuters reporting. Nigerian security sources say at least 2 people were killed in a clash between Nigerian state security officers and a group campaigning for the cessation of a part of southeastern Nigeria, formerly known as Biafra. The incident between Nigerian Department of State Services agents and members of the outlawed indigenous people of Biafra took place in southeastern Nigeria's Enugu state, according to Reuters. In conflicting reports, DSS says 2 of its personnel were killed in what they called an unprovoked attack, while the IPOB said in a statement 21 of their members were killed and more than 40 others arrested after security forces stormed one of their meetings, according to Reuters. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is expected to visit Sudan in the coming days, according to Sudanese and U.S. officials. Sudan has been normalizing relations with the United States since the overthrow of former leader Omar al-Bashir in April 2019. But the nation is still seeking removal from a list of countries the U.S. considers as state sponsors of terrorism. The listing dates back to 1993 and makes Sudan, struggling with a deep economic crisis, technically ineligible for debt relief and financing from international lenders. While in Sudan, the State Department says Pompeo is to meet Prime Minister Abdel Hamdok and the head of its ruling council, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, to discuss continued U.S. support for the civilian-led transitional government. It has been more than a month since Hakalu Hundessa, a popular singer who backed the push by Ethiopia's Oromo ethnic group for greater autonomy, was assassinated in Addis Ababa, sparking widespread unrest that led to more than 178 deaths. Since then, homes and businesses have been destroyed and thousands have been arrested. Simon Marks visited the hotspot town of Ziwe to learn more.
Since the assassination of popular Oromo singer Hakalu Hundessa in Addis Ababa in late June, many living in Ethiopia's Oromia region have been looking for answers about his death and the deadly unrest and destruction that followed. Yeshi Demelesh lives in the town of Ziwai, about 130 kilometers from Addis Ababa. The day after Hakalu's death, she says a group of young people came banging on her door, torched her home, and burned her small grocery store.
Without me being aware or prepared, they came into my house, and as you can see, they burnt everything. I don't know what I did to God. It's hard to handle this at my age.
Like Yeshi, many here belong to the Amhara ethnic group and suspect they were targeted because of their background, while various ethnic groups allege the government created a guise to arrest opposition members.
Security officials and the city administration were standing by and watching when people were burning and destroying property. Then they started arresting innocent people.
The government arrested Jawar Mohammed, a popular Oromo politician and member of the opposition Oromo Federalist Congress. Scores of OFC members and youths belonging to an Oromo youth movement known as the Kiro have also been detained in makeshift detention centres.
Abiy is arresting Oromo activists and politicians who think they will win the election, so they don't participate in the vote and bring change to the country.
The government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, a 2019 Nobel Peace Prize winner, rejects the allegations. Abiy has said he wants to transition Ethiopia to a multi-party democracy. The government blames the unrest on the opposition Tigray People's Liberation Front, claiming it coordinated the violence following Hakalu's death. Zawai's cabinet chief for the mayor, Ababa Bayene, denies arrests were politically motivated.
No one in the opposition has been arrested because of their political beliefs. They were arrested because they were suspected of committing a crime.
Police confirmed to VOA this warehouse is one of several detention centres in town that are holding prisoners, though reporters were denied access. A senior government official, who did not want to be identified, alleged that since Hakalu's death, hundreds of government employees have been detained.
They are collecting, arresting, of feeling Oromo nationalism.
One woman described how her husband was taken away.
I held on to my husband's shirt and said, "The attackers will not have mercy on us today." He pushed me away and said, "Save yourself and the kids." That was the last time I saw him.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Abiy has said the unrest should not be viewed in simplistic terms and noted that some government and ruling party leadership members have also been apprehended for their alleged role in the recent violence. Simon Marks for VOA News, Ziwai, Ethiopia.
The coronavirus pandemic has now claimed over 800,000 lives. Data from Reuters shows increasing fatalities driven by the United States, Brazil, and India. David Doyle reports.
The global death toll from COVID-19 has passed 800,000, according to a Reuters tally, with the increase being driven by the United States, Brazil, and India. In the US, fatalities passed 170,000 on Sunday, the highest in the world. And while the number of new cases is down from a peak in July, the country is still seeing over 360,000 new cases per week. India, which is only the third country after the US and Brazil to report over 2 million cases, saw deaths top 50,000 last week. It has a relatively low case fatality rate at 1.9% compared to a global average of 3.5%, though that may be due to underreporting. Brazil and the United States have rates of around 3%, and health experts have raised the alarm that neither have a coordinated plan to fight the pandemic, as many officials focus on reopening schools and businesses. something that will likely worsen the outbreak. Several countries are also witnessing new surges in cases of the coronavirus. On Sunday, South Korea reported its highest daily rise in cases since March, with the spread attributed to a Seoul church run by a right-wing preacher and from political demonstrations that its members had attended. Australia recorded a further 17 coronavirus deaths on Sunday as it battles a second wave of infections, centred on the state of Victoria. Globally, according to Reuters calculations, the pandemic is killing nearly 5,900 people every day, equating to 246 per hour, or one person every 15 seconds.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. African Americans are nearly 4 times more likely to die of COVID-19 than whites by one estimate. But polls show more blacks than whites say they will not get a coronavirus vaccine when one becomes available. A history of racism in medicine means trust in the health system is lower among African Americans. To help overcome those barriers, health officials are turning to a respected institution in the Black community, barbershops. VOA Steve Baragona has more.
I get all my education from the barbershop, news.
Fred Spry owns a barbershop just north of Washington. He's close with his clients, he says.
Most everybody calls friends and family. And if they were my friends and family, they became my friends and family after knowing them.
That intimate relationship between barber and client has deep roots in African American culture.
All this time throughout our history, black barbershops have been a place of refuge. They're like a sacred place.
What up, Fred?
Stephen Thomas heads the University of Maryland Center for Health Equity. He says that trusted relationship is an important one during the COVID-19 pandemic because trust in doctors is low in the black community.
For many African Americans, it's part of the oral tradition that you don't trust people in white coats who come into your neighborhood to say they want to help you.
Thomas says that tradition is rooted in centuries of racism, including unethical medical experiments involving blacks.
That's the zone of privacy.
Thomas says though African Americans are dying of COVID-19 at much higher rates than whites, they are also more skeptical about a vaccine.
If it was available tomorrow, would you take it?
No.
No! Everybody's waiting for a vaccine.
I mean, you want my honest answer or you want me to give it the political answer?
I want your honest answer.
But Thomas has a plan to build confidence.
No food, anything in the past 30 minutes, right?
No, sir.
For one thing, he wants black barbershops to offer COVID tests. For more than a decade, Thomas has been turning black barbers and stylists into health advocates. They've been helping educate their clients about conditions like HIV, heart disease, and cancer, which minorities suffer at higher rates than whites. Studies show it works. Fred Spry says when one of his clients got screened for cancer, his doctor found a tumor and removed it.
It felt good because it's like I may have saved his life and it may have saved his family from having to mourn over him, much earlier than they had to.
There you go.
Thomas is arming his network of barbers and stylists with COVID facts to combat misinformation. And with the coming influenza season threatening to make a bad situation worse, Thomas wants barbers to talk to their clients about flu shots.
We need to be working on that right now. The reasons why people are not taking the flu shot may be the same reasons they won't take a COVID vaccine when the time comes. Fear, mistrust.
That could change, he says, with a shave and a haircut and a word from someone they trust. Steve Baragona, Kensington, Maryland.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, the U.S. Republican Party gears up for its national convention this week with a series of live and virtual events. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Linor Moudou, your VOA Health correspondent. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says the best way to reduce your chances of being infected or spreading coronavirus is to wear a mask to avoid breathing any small liquid droplets which may contain the virus. Regularly wash your hands with soap and water or clean your hands with an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Presidential nominating conventions do not date all the way back to the early days of the United States. Back then, political parties held caucuses where small groups of party leaders chose candidates. It wasn't until the 12th presidential election in 1832 that parties held conventions to select their candidates. There were occasional surprises over the candidates selected at conventions. Some conventions took a long time to name a nominee. In 1924, the Democrats spent 16 days to take 109 votes to nominate John Davis, who wound up losing the election to Republican Calvin Coolidge. Modern conventions move quicker than that. Most of the delegates are awarded to candidates through state caucuses or primaries, and the nominee is known before the convention begins. Conventions still deliver an occasional surprise. Nominees often name their pick for vice president at a convention. Because they are televised, they attract the attention of voters trying to decide how to vote in November. The COVID pandemic has forced both parties to change plans for 2020, relying more on virtual settings without large crowds of faithful party in attendance.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Republicans prepare to open their national convention this week with a series of live and virtual events. Party delegates start Monday in Charlotte, North Carolina, and will likely officially nominate President Donald Trump as their candidate in November's national election to decide who controls the White House. The president plans to speak at all 4 nights of the convention and to give his acceptance speech in Washington. Party representatives discussed on Sunday morning talk shows. VOA's Arashar Basadi has more.
Republican delegates begin meeting this week in Charlotte, North Carolina, and will likely nominate President Donald Trump as their candidate to defeat former Vice President Joe Biden in November's presidential election. Trump dealing with a troubled economy, ongoing protests over social and racial injustice, and criticism over his response to a coronavirus pandemic that has killed more than 176,000 Americans trails Biden in most national polls. Sunday, White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, however, praised his boss's work ethic in making a pitch for a second term.
This president, each and every day, is not only well-prepped, but does more than any president that I've ever been able to have the privilege of researching and reading about in terms of wanting to make sure that we advance critical agendas for the hardworking American people on Main Street.
Meanwhile, Trump's challenger, Joe Biden, made history last week naming Senator Kamala Harris as his vice presidential candidate. Harris is the first black woman and South Asian American on a national ticket, and Deputy Campaign Manager Kate Bedingfield says Biden is about inclusion and a promise to heal a nation battling the coronavirus pandemic.
As president, Joe Biden is somebody who would be able to bring people to the table to get meaningful change done and to get relief to people who need it, to the small businesses who are hurting, to the working families who are hurting.
As many as 336 of more than 2,400 Republican delegates will be in Charlotte Monday, after which the Republican Party will move to virtual locations. Other members of the Trump family will speak this week, including First Lady Melania Trump. The president is expected to appear every night, and Thursday he will accept the party's nomination from the South Lawn of the White House, where he will deliver his acceptance speech. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
Republican delegates to the party's U.S. National Convention are flying into the state of North Carolina this week, where, because of the pandemic, there is a scaled-down in-person convention as well as virtual events. Caroline Presutti spoke with national delegates arriving from around the country who are eager to renominate President Donald Trump to win a second term.
Shirlene Ostrov is stepping out cautiously. It is her first visit outside her state since the pandemic. Ostrov is the Republican chair from Hawaii, a Democratic-controlled state with severe COVID restrictions.
Our economy is decimated. We have zero tourists coming in. Restaurants aren't open. And people say this is not the vision. This is not going to be sustainable.
It's also challenging to be Republican in the traditionally liberal state of Oregon, where Portland is in its third month of Black Lives Matter protests. Bill Currier says the president did his part to try to end them.
When he offered to help with national or federal resources in Portland to calm or quell the riots and so on, and the mayor and the governor basically snubbed him, that didn't sit well with people, even non-Republicans.
Democrats argued last week that Trump's actions as president worsened both the pandemic and racial protests. National polls indicate their presidential nominee, Joe Biden, now has a 9-point lead. But among Republicans, Trump remains popular. And among Americans, his 42% approval rating is a point higher than a year ago. Kansas delegate Mike Kuckelman says he listened to Democrats during their convention and didn't hear anything new.
I saw that, and a lot of what Biden said was just they were attacks on the president. He didn't tell us anything that he was going to do or his administration would do if he were elected.
Tonight, Biden selected California Senator Kamala Harris as his running mate. As the first black woman and first Asian American woman on a major party ticket, she is seen partly as a way to win over women voters. Ostrov, who is raising 2 college-aged daughters, says she doubts its effectiveness.
I'm not an identity politics person. Obviously, I'm a daughter of immigrants. I served the military. I'm a woman of color. None of that is important on why to vote for or identify with a candidate.
Democrats are also out near the convention trying to change minds, but not Tracy Honnells.
For me doing that? Absolutely not. No, I support President Trump. I've supported him since 2016, early on in 2016. I believe that he's the right person to take us forward. There's no way I would consider moving over to support Joe Biden.
Security around the convention hall is tight. The in-person events on Monday impose a limit of just 6 delegates per state and territory. And it doesn't end here. The 336 delegates are invited to the White House on Thursday to watch President Trump accept his party's nomination in person. And it doesn't end here. The 336 delegates are invited to the White House on Thursday to watch President Trump accept his party's nomination in person. Carolyn Prasuti, VOA News, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Some elderly Americans who normally volunteer to work at election polling stations say they will stay home this year because of the risk of contracting COVID-19. The elderly are the most vulnerable to the coronavirus, and this is likely to have an effect on the November elections, not just for turnout, but also at the polling stations themselves, because they depend on volunteer workers. More in this report by Valentina Vasilieva, narrated by Anna Rice.
65-year-old Elizabeth Slanta from Arlington, Virginia, has been volunteering at polling stations for the past 3 decades. It's been a Slanta family tradition. Her mother has also helped out at the polls. Retired in 2011, Slanta was looking forward to volunteering again in November until she tested positive for COVID-19 in March.
I came up with the virus, coronavirus, on the 14th of March. And the only real contact that I could think of that I really had a lot of contact with people was at the polls, because I worked at my precinct near where I live.
The virus hit Slanta hard. For 3 long weeks, she was at home fighting a high fever, and she's still suffering from the virus's effects. She has not regained her sense of smell and has lost some of her hair. Recently, she decided that until the pandemic is over, she's not going to volunteer at the polls.
The chief in my precinct, his wife, I think, might be somehow immune compromised. And then also his mother-in-law lives with them now. So I emailed him for the last election and I said, I am not going to be working, so don't count on me. And he said, I think I am not going to work either because, of the situation.
When Slanta worked at the polls for primary elections in March, there were no strict protective measures in place yet. Face masks in indoor public spaces were not mandatory, and social distancing wasn't taken seriously either. But the situation has changed, says another poll worker, Emily Landsman, who plans to volunteer in November.
The county provided us with masks, and they say Arlington elections, so they're kind of fun as far as masks go. They offered us face shields if we wanted that. They put up plexiglass barriers, so there's a barrier between the voter and us.
Still, Landsman says she's a little worried. She's volunteering at the largest polling station in Arlington County, where over 6,000 people are registered. But she's determined to go through with it. After all, she adds, someone does have to work. According to the data of the U.S. Election Assistance Commission, in 2018, some 58% of election workers were over 60. That is the age group that is most at risk during the coronavirus pandemic. If local election officials don't manage to find enough younger volunteers, the 2020 November elections might be tricky, says Ryan Pierannunzi of the Fair Elections Center.
So in 2016, according to the EAC, the Election Assistance Commission, it took over 900,000 poll workers to hold the election across the country in 2016, and a significant portion of those were over the age of 60. So we know that it's going to be hundreds of thousands of people who are older Americans over the age of 60 who have served in the past, and we're not sure, what proportion of those will be serving this year versus not.
Staffing companies are reaching out to college students to work, but experts say it is not that easy to convince young Americans. Poll work usually requires 12 hours a day with lots of responsibility and also stress. Staffing polling centers does pay. The compensation varies from state to state and can range from $14 to $15 an hour. This might motivate some young unemployed students, recruiters believe. The question is whether there will be enough volunteers to staff the polling centers in November. For Valentina Vasilyeva in Washington, Anna Rice, VOA News.
That's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.
Being part of Our Voices is about more than just sitting here and talking about women's issues. It's about listening to them
and bringing their opinions to the table and making sure their voices are heard.
Because our lived experiences, our stories, and our voices will help shape the next generation.